everybody. This is William Del Pilar, and this is the Red, White, and Rouge show. And I am here with my co-host, Sean King. No relation to Talcum X. Sean, my brother, how are you doing today?
Good, good. Ready to get this going.
Let me take care of what pays the bills. For everybody, this is the Red, White, and Rude Show, episode 5. You can catch previous episodes at grumblingsmedia.com as well as YouTube and Rumble. Under those two channels, we are under the name Grumblings Media. You can also hear us on your traditional podcast outlets such as Google, Spotify, Apple, and Pandora. And Sean, this is a first episode where we played it like a TV show, reviewing each segment, what we want to get out, what we want to do. I kind of think we've been improving a little. What are your thoughts?
Well, are we getting more listens? And that'll be the ultimate determinant.
That is
I
true. We
guess.
had some massive listening growth the first show. Yeah. Second show, well, yeah, we got to get better topics, I think. Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah,
growth
it's
process.
definitely. It's not the host. It's got to be the topics.
There you go. There you go. There you go. So let's get to it. We've got some good topics. We're going to talk about the movie Leave the World Behind. We were going to talk about that last week. For those that don't know, it's making the media rounds for a variety of reasons, one being that the Obamas were executive producers. From there, we're going to talk about Jonathan Majors and his downfall, his fall from grace, rising star, seen as one of the next strong black lead actors in America, has been canceled. And we're going to talk about that. And finally, we got some quick hits. We may or may not get to some of them depending on the time, but hopefully we have some time to talk about Mickey Mouse and the public domain. We want to give you a final update on Chandler Bing, aka Matthew Perry, and the final one. Why am I drawing a blank here, Sean? The Marvels. The Marvels concluded their theatrical run, and the numbers are in on that. So, Sean, let's get to it. First of all, tell me a little bit about Leave the World Behind, the overview of what it is. First of all, it's a Netflix movie. If you have Netflix, you can see it. It did have a very short theatrical release, as most Netflix, not high budget, but movies they want to go viral and be seen. So tell us about the premise before we get into breaking it down.
Well, the short version is that family does a getaway. They rent a nice little home out in the nice part of New York, and they're there on vacation, and then weird things start happening. I guess a cyber attack takes place and knocks out all their devices, and then two strangers to them, but apparent owners of the home they're renting show up, and from there it's the interaction between these two people and the family living there, and trying to figure out what is exactly going on in the world around them.
Right. It's what you would call an apocalyptic. Is that how you pronounce it? An apocalyptic thriller.
Post
And
post apop.
yeah,
I can't even spell.
post-apocalyptic. It's
Yeah,
it's the first stage towards a dystopian society that you see on all the other science fiction style movies. The Obamas were executive producers. Now, Sean and I talked about this off the air and getting our notes and our act together. And one definition I have for executive producers was given to me when I took a couple of film courses in college, and actually they helped out a lot in understanding Hollywood and how it works. And one of the premises I was given for executive producer by the teacher, which she told the class, she goes, sometimes those titles are given out to people who don't actually do nothing. But they got to find a title for them to justify the salary, or in other cases, it's a big name and they want that big name attached to the movie. And I believe that. But I remember this, Sean, in the 90s. My first thought, being a 28-year-old kid, 28-year-old kid, was, well, man, that sucks for the executive producers who actually do the work. And you have some insight into that and how that's now broken down.
yeah. Well, when you watch the movie, the Obamas are listed in the opening scenes when they're rolling names. The Obamas are listed as the first executive producers, and then they start listing other executive producers, and then executive producers with the symbol PGA after their name. And PGA stands for Producers Guild of America. So I talked to some people who are in the industry to try to get some clarification on this. And you get the designation is coveted by people. That PGA is coveted because it says that it's an evaluation marker to prove that you produced pretty much the movie from inception of idea to casting, and that you pretty much did all the work. So the people who had that by their name on this film, I'm thinking, are the ones that, actually did most of the work. And the people like the Obamas who just had their name up there, you know, did what you learned in film class, was given a credit to, pretty much make them feel good and get their name attached to the film.
And it works, Sean, because the Obamas are progressive gods. They've toot, and there's all the progressives. Oh my God, unicorn farts, unicorn farts. I mean, that's how they're seen. So that was a smart move, actually. The book's author is an anti-Trump hater, hates him with a passion, and wrote the book during Trump's reign. And in his mind, this is what Trump was bringing to the world. Ironically, Trump never got us into any world wars. We weren't close to this. We are close to it now with Biden, though. But we kind of misstepped here, Sean. First of all, let me tell the audience what an executive producer does. I'm going to read this. It's a top-level film production member who works for a studio or produces films independently. They are in charge of source funding and supervising other producers. And that's kind of what I remember from my class back in the 1990s, my film class. And by the way, the teacher did not like me. Some of their specific duties are concept development. They had nothing to do with this. The book was already written. Another writer took it and transformed it to the screen. Budget management, they had nothing to do with it. They didn't put a dime in. They probably didn't bring anybody in to help pay for the movie. But I could be wrong, because that's the power of people like the Obamas. People want to work with them just to be seen with them. So it's easy for them to get some rich people to put some money in. So maybe they had some work in that. And intellectual property ownership. That I have no clue on, but it deals with owning the intellectual property of the project they are working on. I would say no, because it's based off a book. They may have the rights, but that's the right to own it, to be able to do something with it, like a film, etc. But like I said, it's also a title with no responsibilities for actors in television shows. After X amount of years, they can't keep justifying that pay raise, that big giant pay raise, so they give him an executive producer title. I remember Kelsey Grammer talking about that before. And again, it's for rich and powerful people who want to be attached to projects, or like the Obamas are on the Netflix board. So that's what the executive producer role. So, Sean, you kind of talked about the movie. The movie's broken up into chapters. Part one, the house, where you talked about where they rent the house, and then during that chapter, the true owners come in, which are two black individuals. One's the daughter and one's the black owner. Played very well. I thought the acting was great, Sean. How do you pronounce his name? Mahershala Ali and another woman played the daughter, and they came in. Amanda Seyfried was played by Julia Roberts. And Sean, what did you think of her role from the perspective? She was not. What was her first big movie?
Pretty Woman.
Yeah, she was not a pretty woman in that. And I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about, well, she's in her 50s and she has not aged well. But she did a tremendous acting role in terms of playing the non-trustworthy human being. What did you think of the acting between Mahershala and her character throughout the movie? And we'll go on to the next part.
Well, first off, I think you're being a little rough. Julia Roberts doesn't look that bad. Jeez, come on. I mean,
No,
she's
you know
not
what it
Pretty
is.
Woman anymore, but
It's her lips. Her top lip has always looked like a bad Botox, not Botox, but fat injection. But that's always been her natural lip. So, but to me, that just looks weird. I do not like women who get those lip injections, because I can't even imitate it. It just kind of grosses me out.
but
You know,
see,
but
I
God
didn't
bless
think
Julia
she got
Roberts'
him.
acting.
I didn't think she got it. I thought she more looked like she has lines from smoking, like, from constant smoking,
Oh,
how you
could
get the
be,
lines
could
around your
be.
mouth. But what do
No,
I
I'm
know? But
sorry,
I think,
Sean.
but
It's just her lip for me. That's it. I mean, her age or Rico's, I didn't even. It's just that lip. It's just not my taste. But so I apologize.
okay.
She has not aged ugly. It's that lip. It's never been. Let me put it to you this way: had I been Richard Gere she would not have been my choice in that movie. Anyway, what did you think of
All
the
right.
acting? I thought those two had not. I don't want to say good chemistry, but they did such a superb job. My hers. They all did. Even Ethan Hawke playing the buffoonish husband. I thought they all did. So overall, what's your thoughts on the acting?
Well, the acting was pretty good. I'm not, like we'll get to what I think of the film, but in general, I think Julia Roberts was playing, portrayed her character well of an angry, untrustworthy woman. I mean, I know they tried to turn it into more of a racist thing, but at the beginning of the movie, she pretty much says she doesn't like people. So I don't think it has to do with racism. It's generally she just wanted to get away from people. I understand that. I go to Disneyland and I'm around thousands of people. I start losing my mind. I can't stand that people. So, but the movie took the turn from her just generally wanting to get away and disliking people to focusing more on a racial tension more than anything, I thought, in this film.
But I got news for people. There is racial tension in those types of situations. It's common human nature. But they were trying to portray it as a racist. And I'm going to fast forward because we're talking about this now. Julia Roberts, in all pure honesty, as white individuals, there is a little bit of that tinge. Not that people are racist, but you have different cultures. However, they want to show that as pure racism. Oh, that's a racist person, racist person. Then let's fast forward to a scene where they're in the bed and the daughter says, "You can't trust white people, Papa, because of this, this, and this." That's a racist, indoctrinated belief that is permeating through America, and it has always permeated once the Democrats said, "This is our game plan to get Black Americans to vote Democrat." So they're justifying the Black child's concerns as legitimate when the reality is it's a racist. It's a racist belief that's being taught to Black Americans. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Flip the switch. If that had been a white person talking to their white father and said, "Daddy, we can't trust them because they're Black," we would still be flooded all over the internet with how racist that is. So my point is that was an unfair and wasn't done properly in truthfulness in terms of portraying that. But Julia Roberts was spot on in how she played the role because I think that is how not just a white person, any person. You reverse the roles there, Sean. Had Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke's characters been Black and been a white family, same reaction. Life and death. You're scared, beatless. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not going to trust a stranger that just shows up and says something. Your thoughts on my specifics of what I just said, and we'll move on to your next point.
Well, I think, getting to the movie where he shows up, I don't personally, yes, okay, so it's a black man showing up at your front door in the middle of the night and they're making it about racism. I am the type of person I'm not going to open my door at whatever midnight at night, I'm going to be there. I would have talked to them through the door, probably while holding a gun, but that's a whole other thing. And ask them why they're here. And then I would have said, well, I don't know you. Great. We've communicated through email. Okay. Well, we'll have to talk later. It's midnight. I'm not allowing someone I don't know into my house. So that was, it got portrayed as racism, but me as a person wouldn't let a white, black, anybody, I wouldn't have opened the door to.
Exactly. Exactly. And to make it even worse in terms of what they tried to portray as white racism, where she goes, "It's a fair ask. Let me see some ID." I mean, like, bleep that. When they were at the door, I would have said, "Let me see the ID. Where's your address that this is your house?" And it would have nothing to do with their Black. It's electricity, power's going out, crap's happening. And y'all all of a sudden show up out of the blue. I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're my long lost cousin. I'm going to do what Sean said. And I would have had a gun too. I was in that situation once and didn't have the gun, and that was a smart decision. I chose not to get the gun when this drunk came up to the house and started charging. And my point being is when stuff happens that quickly, that fast, and I'm sure you as a former cop have seen that. Sometimes you react off of instinct. So I thought that whole scene Sean played out was nothing but fake movie because I think the average human would not have reacted and let them in as they did. you know. So let's move on then. So then there's the curve when she notices alerts on the blackout, and that's when the GH, played by Mahershala, confides in her that, hey, look, I tried to get my satellite phone, which is satellite based, to work, nothing to do with Wi-Fi, and it didn't work. So I thought they were setting the movie up pretty well at that point. However, at that point, Sean, I thought the movie was moving kind of slow. Any thoughts before we move on to the next part?
No, well, let's move on to the next part.
Okay, so then you have the part three called the noise, and that's where we get the first talk about Kevin Bacon. He was seen earlier as a cold, old country guy, didn't care that she was smiling at him, got instructions left. And that's all we heard about him until this scene. And they decide he comes up because he's a prepper. He's a prepper. And also the pamphlet, they start getting scared because the big drone dropping pamphlets showing that they may be attacked by somebody. For Americans out there, back in the day, and I don't know if they still do it, but back in the day, we used to have big old planes flying over countries we were fighting, and they would drop pamphlets. Help is coming, we're here. Kind of that same role they were playing, but saying death to America. And then they decide to leave. And Sean, it's not important to the scene, but you brought it up when we weren't talking. But I just want to briefly talk about your issue in relation to the movie, how there was a disconnect with reality, with your thoughts on the Wi-Fi and all that, but with the scene when they're trying to escape Long Island.
Are you talking about the electricity or
Yeah,
the
yeah, combined with what you saw with what the cars were doing, it kind of
yeah,
didn't make sense to you.
it didn't make
As a
sense to me that they knocked out Wi-Fi, they knocked out anything being able to transmit over even the TV. Um, Everything got knocked out. The Teslas were driving and crashing. I don't know how they were controlling that, but yet they still had power at the house. So if and they're dropping pamphlets, so they managed to knock out everything but the power. Get a hold of satellites to control, say, all this stuff, but they didn't knock out the power. That's where I was a little
No, I
confused.
get you. I get you. And I think you're wrong and right, or you're on the right path, but it can all be explained. One, with the cars, possibly satellites. With them having power, it's because they could be on a grid that hasn't been affected. Because remember, theoretically, it was New York City was one of the targets as any big urban area. But all that said, Sean, it doesn't really matter. I think it had to be that way to keep the movie going forward, to keep the plot rolling. It's kind of like you have to assume certain TV mythological beliefs so the movie and the story can be told. I think that's kind of what happened. Well, so in essence, once they saw they couldn't leave on Long Island, they were forced to go back to the house. And that brought us to part four, the flood. The only thing important about the flood in terms of our talk is that the son's teeth started to fall out. And they never really explained that at all. But then we get to part five, which is what brings us to isn't this the right word, the penultimate point, or all the plot points coming together for us to finally figure out what's happening, and that was predicated by the kid losing his teeth. They kind of alluded to it through a tick bite. I told my wife, based off a radio report in the movies about radiation, pockets of what GH has said, I'm like, maybe there was some radiation that had been bombarding the electromagnetic freaks. Who knows? What was your thought with the teeth falling out? Were you able to tie that into making sense with the movie?
Well, I tied it in that they used the tick bite as the reason. Now I don't know what tick bites cause teeth to fall out that quickly, but that's what they used. I would have thought more of a radiation, but then other people should have been affected and showed some signs. So it alluded to the tick, but didn't sell me on it. Let's just say.
Right, right. And I thought another fake movie scene was her lack of. When I was sick like that, I don't know about your mom, but my mom would be all over me. Yeah, let me take the tent. Let me do this. Let me do that. Especially during an apocalyptic time when you're so concerned about your family and living and dying. So I kind of found her nonchalantness a little off-putting in terms of her concern for her son there. And if he's sick with a fever, what the hell's he doing in bed with y'all? Because the family was all huddled together. So that was my issue with that. But I kind of found that as a poor plot point that get the movie moving forward. But I guess maybe I'm wrong because the teeth is what facilitated the whole plot point of the moving forward with Kevin Bacon getting involved. And I thought they did a good scene with human nature and with Kevin Bacon and how he was viewing life. And talk about that in terms of what your thoughts about it on the porch and the standoff. And then I want to bring the race component back into it afterwards, after you make your comments. But what did you think of that scene playing out? In your mind, did it show human nature, what could happen to people during an apocalyptic time?
Well, definitely. I see the Kevin Bacon character, and I think I'm pretty close to being that guy someday because I'd have a shotgun. I have supplies, and if people start coming to my house, I'd probably, knowing what he knows that things have happened and that they're isolated and no one's coming to save you right now. I'd probably be at my front door with a shotgun too, thinking, hey, these people are here to take my food, my water, whatever I got. So that's not happening. Let's meet them at the front door with the shotgun. So I know you're going to get into the racial thing, but I think it's just you not trusting anybody coming to your door. Whether it had just been Ethan Hawke's character by himself showing up to the door, I think the reaction would have been exactly the same. The character they showed, the brief moments we got, was he loaded up his truck prepping, and so he was obviously a prepper. And when people came to his door, that's how he's going to greet them during that situation.
I agree. I agree. And to for the audience, what we're talking about is towards the end of the movie, the kid without the teeth. They Julia Roberts' character recognized him as stocking up. He was stocking his truck up with a lot of supplies. That's what she saw early. And then through coincidence of movie magic, Kevin Bacon's character happened to be the contractor who had repaired GH's uh, house and upgraded it, et cetera, et cetera. That's why they went there. So he was a prepper. And Sean's absolutely correct. That's how I think it would play out. He wants to protect his family. They want to get help for their son. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has everything to do with human nature, survivability, and fear, scare, and the fear of death. And the racism component came in through subliminal. There's a whole art to studying Hollywood and subliminal or subconscious messaging. So things you see but's not related kind of trigger certain things. In this case, it was having the flag on the porch. He was a prepper and he didn't care. Technically, that's all true. But the flag was the scene, the kicker scene, because they tried to tie preppers in with patriotism, and then from there it extended out to the natural. He's an a-hole character because he doesn't want to help it, and the audience never ever ever wanting to attach themselves to the reality of any situation, but and rather playing God on their soapbox, watching it from above, judge him in a different way than what he should really be judged. So that was and I actually saw that, but I didn't care. I didn't care, Sean, about any of the racial overtones here because I was into the movie more so. But I did see it and recognize it for what it is and was. And it's kind of depressing because they don't have to show it that way. Because again, if they want to show realism, they would have portrayed the daughter as being the racist she was with her comment about you can't trust white people. Why? Because they were stereotyping the whole culture. And again, had somebody said you can't trust black people, how that would have been all over the news. They're racist. So I got that out of it. But overall, Sean, and to the audience, that was the gist of the movie, except for one thing we haven't brought up yet. I'll let Sean talk about that. What was the one recurring theme throughout the whole movie, which culminated at the very end? And it's about another topic we're going to talk about later.
Which one are you alluding to?
The Friends theme throughout the movie.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, then maybe you should talk about that because you're the Friends fanatic. I've barely watched any episodes.
Actually, I'm just a great researcher. I've never watched all of Friends. I've always watched episodes of it. I still want to see the final episode because I saw the episode before it, and I want to see how it ended. And so the daughter is obsessed with Friends. She's watched every episode, and the apocalypse happens. And the final episode is on her iPad, stuck in mid-frame at the beginning. And throughout the movie, her whole shtick is, I don't care that we're all dying in the apocalypse here. I want to see my final episode of Friends. So at the end of the movie, the resolution of the movie, and it boggles my mind that people didn't get this, and we'll talk about this now, is the resolution of the movie was they're in an apocalypse. Doesn't matter what they think of one another. They've got to trust and work with each other and have each other's back. And that's kind of the resolution we come out with. And part of the resolution is there's a bunker down the road. That's where we got to go. And during the final third of the movie, the young girl's missing. She just took off one morning and says, I've got to do this myself. Meaning she's made up her mind to do something. And the whole underlying thing, we've got to find her. Where's she at? And at the end, they show her. She found the bunker. And because it's a bunker, it's meant for end of day. So obviously food, entertainment, and they show a whole wall of DVDs. And obviously you know what's coming. What's there is Friends. So as she's popping the DVD in, they're showing New York City getting bombed. Sean, what was your thought when that, did that have any relevance to you? To me, it didn't have relevance as much as concluding the underlying theme of the movie, the young girl wanting to watch the final episode of Friends, and she finally gets to watch it. That's all I got out of it. I'm sure they were trying to tie in a message with that final scene of her watching Friends and New York City being bombed and everybody concluding we're in apocalyptic times. Did you get any tie-in, or did you sense anything like that? Did that scene strike you in the sense of it was part of a bigger message?
Well, I can see what he was trying to do, because I thought this whole movie, the director was trying too hard to make, I call it too filmsy, the art of filmmaking. And I'm no filmmaker, obviously, but number one, she wants to see Friends, which is what all these people are trying to become, friends. So they're doing the
Oh,
undertone.
good.
The last episode is the last one, hence they're the last ones. And, so yeah, I see where they're making it filmsy, how they're tying Friends, the last one, in, because I saw, as I was telling you, this whole movie seemed to me like he was trying too hard to make it, that filmy type of movie that, other filmmakers will think is great, but, the casual viewer like me is like, what? I told you how he did the crazy weird camera angles numerous times that actually got me dizzy a couple times. And I was like, he's just trying too hard to do weird camera angles. And then, when scenes are coming up, when they're trying to hold your attention, they're using piano key strikes, like ding, ding, over and over again, like old Alfred Hitchcock soundtracks. So I just thought in general, this whole movie, if you're looking at it, was trying too hard to be a filmmaker's film instead of a film for the viewer. So that's my tie-in that I saw. Is it really necessary? I guess if you're Mr. Filmmaker, it is. For the casual viewer like me, not so much.
Yeah, that's always I forget the term. I don't know the term, but there's always some kind of theme in a lot of movies that isn't directly related, but kind of transcends the movie and you follow along. And for Sean, for you saying I'm the Friends buff, because I'm not. You're the one who was able to explain the ending there. I had no clue it was called the last one there. And for the audience, despite all the racial issues, et cetera, there's one conclusion all scientists, all preppers, everybody has come to in apocalyptic times. The only way you're going to survive is by working together to survive whatever calamity is coming. And I'm not going to say it's a poignant. Is that how you say it? Poignant. Poignant.
Poignant?
But
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't a poignant scene, but it was one of those serious, deep scenes at the end of the car with GH, the father of Julia Roberts' character, I mean the husband and the son, where they realize you got my back. This is what's happening, and they realize that, and they head in the bunker. And then the daughter, who showed herself to be quite the racist, versus the mother, who the writers wanted us to see as racist, they come together too and realize it's fear that's driving them. They're scared and they're lashing out and they come together. And my point being is, I'm glad the writers got that right, because it broadened the horizon. And this isn't an important movie that people have to see, but I thought that's what made the movie. I like that movie versus I watched this whole movie to the end. That's the freaking ending. I hate it when that happens. When it's an ending that doesn't fulfill you, or it's a political ending, or something stupid that destroys what I thought was a pretty decent movie. So I thought the ending was very realistic in a happy way. Because in real life, it could also go the other way. GH really realizes, oh dear God, this is how the world is. Boom, boom, shoots the other family. Goes to his home. What did you think of the ending, and from the perspective of what I'm saying? How did you see it?
You know, they they sort of wrapped it up a little quicker than I would have liked, but I mean, the movie was already, I think, 2 hours and 20 minutes at that point, so I think they were forced to wrap it up. So, and which also we've been on this topic for a while. We should
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
wrap
We
it
got
up.
one more
So
comment. One
let's
more comment.
so
The
let's
final
just
comments is the reception. The reception. 76% positive review, average rating of 6.9 by 10 over 10. That was Rotten Tomatoes. Metacritic assigned it a film score of 67 out of 100. The viewership, I just checked today, from December 4th to December 10th, it was the number one movie on Netflix with 41.7 million views. It's still the number one. However, for it to have any relevance, it's got to stay in the top 10 for about a month or two. And because a lot of movies start with a bang on top 10, Cowboy Bebop, for example, and then they fall off and they become flops. So that was the reviews of it. It was a book based of the Trump presidency and how the author felt on Trump's sentiments. Overall, great job. I would recommend it to people. Sean is right. I thought there was more coming at the end, and I would have watched it. But the truth is, at 2 hours and 20 minutes, they had to cut it off. I don't know if that was because the book was like that or they chose to. The one final comment I'll say is they wanted to make this a representation of the Trump presidency, the Trump era, Sean. It actually is more of a representation of the Biden era. The world's devolving. We're watching it happen today. We have an inept president who does nothing. Wars breaking out across the globe. Our own citizens are in economic hardship. Race relations are a disaster, and people feel as if there's no hope. The author wanted to sit there and show that in Trump, which was the exact opposite, with the greatest booming economy in our history. Race relations were improving under Trump in terms of the working class people. Everything I just said falls under the Biden. You get the last word on what I just said about this represents the Biden era, and then we move on.
Well, if we're representing the Biden era, I should be taking a nap during this podcast, like he's taking naps all the time that I see him while he's out and about. But anyways, uh, yeah, I'm no fan of him, and it's sadly representing where our country's headed, in my opinion, because of our current administration. And I'll leave it at that, as Sleepy Joe is asleep at the wheel, and
There you
we can
go.
move on.
All right, Jonathan Majors canceled. Uh, you know, it's tough seeing somebody getting canceled for me, a man. But you gotta. I always sit there and say it's tough for me to see that because they're always accused, judged, and executed without the evidence. This case, the evidence actually came out, and the jury found him guilty. Talk to us about Jonathan Majors, the overview of what's. Well, first of all, who is Jonathan Majors, and then an overview of what's happening to him.
Well, he's a actor, obviously, who's been in some Marvel movies. He played Kang, the Conqueror, I believe it's called, in
Yeah.
the Ant-Man movie, and then he's been in the Loki series, I guess. I didn't really pay attention to any of those movies of all the Marvel ones. So, but anyways, but getting back to your point, he was luckily not canceled until after he was convicted, which is typically not what's happening in our culture.
Right.
So for people screaming, which we'll get to, whether racism brought him down, if anything, he's treated better than most people. If I remember correctly, Johnny Depp was pretty much thrown out of the Pirates movie before his whole trial. This man at least had his trial. He got arrested in March of 2023. He was just convicted on December 18th of this year. He's found guilty of 2 misdemeanor counts of assault and harassment of his now ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari. I pronounced that right.
Mhm.
He'll be sentenced in February, and after his conviction, he was his Marvel Studios dropped him. Pretty much anybody that had projects with him, I think he's in either the Army or Air Force ads. He got dropped for that. Um, so I think that's more fair. I see numerous times people getting dropped uh, before, you know, before anything comes out, and then later on they say, "Oh, whoops, we were wrong," but the damage has already been done. So at
Yeah.
least in his case, hey, we'll keep you around, we'll monitor it, and oh, okay, your peers judged you as guilty. There's video of you doing it. They judged you. Now we're going to cut
Yeah,
ties.
yeah, yeah. He's guilty. There's no doubt about it. He's guilty. The video, the Texas show it. It's this the punishment warrant, meaning his cancellation being dropped. That's a moral dilemma. Each person has to look on themselves individually based on what they would do. But in essence, he assaulted this woman, his girlfriend Grace Jabari, in a car in New York in March. He broke her finger and her arm swelled up along with her ear, so maybe he punched her or something. Who knows? But as you said, he was found guilty. His sentencing will be February 6th. Manhattan, and this is what's surprising. I'll be honest. I was surprised that the district attorney Alvin Bragg, who was very racial, in how he proceeds with who he decides to go after. I was shocked that he did go after him, but I think the feminists who all supported him, all those groups, he kind of had no choice. They viewed him as just a man, and we're going to go after him because this is the Me Too movement. And he said that Major showed a pattern of abuse and coercion, and obviously the jury agreed with him. And for those who aren't aware, the next upcoming segment of the Marvel Comics universe, it's the new chapter. That whole universe has been built upon chapters, and Avengers Endgame was the end chapter of the current saga. And Kang the Conqueror is supposedly a major part in the upcoming saga. And for those that don't understand, Thanos is the big daddy, but Kang the Conqueror is also a big bad guy in the Marvel universe, as is who's Silver Surfer's big enemy. Uh, uh, uh,
Yeah, I can't remember.
Galactus. Galactus. So
Okay,
so
there
like
you go.
Thanos, Kang, and Galactus, like the three big cosmic beings, and Kang was on hand here. He tried to defend himself by saying he had a rough childhood, this or that. But his education is pretty is a formidable pedigree for anybody to match. Bachelor's degree for the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, Yale, graduating with a Master of Fine Arts. So talk to us. So my point is, he's a highly educated man. He knows what's right, what's wrong, etc., etc. But talk to us about. It seems like he was already dating. Talk to us about what caused it, Sean. What caused him to beat his woman? Yeah.
Well, supposedly it started over him. Him. Okay. His ex saw a romantic text from another woman on his phone and grabbed his phone. And I guess that's what got him angry at her. And this is sort of confirmed in text messages released, I guess, during the trial. A text message from Jabari said, "I told him that it was my fault for trying to grab your phone." So that would seem to confirm that, yes, she did see a romantic text message from another woman and grabbed it, which brings me to my next thing, which is, I'm just speculating here, but this happened at the end of March, this little incident. And then I was reading that Mr. Majors had a new girlfriend as of May. So pretty much a month later, he's dating another actress, Megan Good. And well, the timeline is just a month later. I wonder if it was her text messages that were discovered by the former ex-girlfriend that started this whole argument.
Well,
Do you have
Sean,
any
you,
opinion
you,
on
you
that?
left out you left out a very important word. It was a romantic text, and that is a big deal. I mean, if a woman texts my phone and my wife sees it, hey, we set for that meeting tomorrow morning at 9. She's not gonna react. But if she sees a text, yo, baby, what time are you gonna be here tomorrow night? Yeah, that's good. So it's very important for the audience to understand it was a romantic text. And Sean's right. You know, And this is not me picking on Jonathan Major. It's just Hollywood. When you are a stud, when I sold my business, God bless my friend Sean. He loved me to death. He's pumping me up. And we're getting hammered at my friend's bar. He closed the bar down. But my other friends brought some girls. They were still single and all that. Once they found out what I had done, what with the business I had done this, they assumed a lot more than what was probably true. They were throwing themselves at me. I BS you not. Two beautiful women. My friend exited them out of the restaurant and we kind of carried on. But my point is, that's me, a nobody. Somebody like Jonathan Majors, to me, who is the next coming to Dennis Haysbert. He's not strikingly handsome, but he's got that rugged look, not quite leading man, but if you're in a bar fight, you want him next to you. So he probably has his pick of the litter. So, Sean, I would be more willing to believe your speculative text or point there as true based off history. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the I don't want to talk about this long, but there was a very key point I want people to understand here. It doesn't matter who you are. Actors are going to play the part, to try to get that jury to feel sympathetic. What did you think about Majors arriving in the courtroom every morning carrying a gold leaf Bible, making sure the jury saw him hugging his family and the woman you just talked about, his current actress girlfriend, Megan Good? I mean, to me, dude, he's an actor. That's like second nature. But to me, that tends to have backlash effect when the jury could say, man, he's just putting on an act. What do you think about him, especially holding the Bible? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think everybody becomes religious when they're facing the justice system. It's pretty amazing how that happens. Everybody's a man of God when you know they're about to put their hand on a Bible to swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Exactly. And this isn't because he's black. I know we've talked about race, but I want to make it clear. It's any man. I mean, remember Weinstein, all of a sudden with a cane. He could barely walk. Yeah, watching him walk. So everybody does it. When I went to court a couple of times, I won't say for what, and I was in my suit. I had my hair cut to boy next door levels. The beaver look. I was clean shaven. Heck, I could barely grow facial hair at that point. But yeah. You gotta put on the act. I just found it humorous. I didn't think it was good or bad on his part. To me, it's like, gotta play the game. But I find it humorous because it's always the Bible. And progressives hate the Bible. But yet they're the first ones to grasp onto it whenever they're in this type of situation, just like everybody else does. Now, Major lawyer said she was the aggressor, that she flew into a jealous rage after reading the text message. She had a fantasy to take him down. She was lying about him. And she was even revenge partying and charging champagne, I guess, on his credit card. She must have had his credit card. But what I found, so your take on that, but what I found kind of sad on his part, I'm not defending him, but it's he found her unconscious in the closet of his their Manhattan penthouse, as I read. And then he called the police and he was arrested and she was transported to the hospital. As a cop, as a man, and just as a human being who looks at everybody equally, that final scene I laid out in terms he calls the cops, he's arrested, she's taken. What goes through your mind when you read something like that happening? Have you been in a situation where it's happened like that?
Well, luckily not to me, but in my personal life. But anyways, so I don't know all the details on it, but a lot of people from when I worked would call the police, and I'm not going to say we saw a good majority of the time the person calling ended up getting arrested, and they're shocked by it. And it's just because you call the police does not mean you're not at fault. And I don't know the situation here, why she was unconscious. Was she drunk and passed out? Or, did they get in a fight and then she got drunk and passed out? Like I said, I don't know all the details, but she had injuries according to what was documented and went to court, broken finger, marks. And, regardless if she flew into a jealous rage, he should have called the police at that point and, had them come. And it seems like he called later to try to, after realizing what had taken place, to make himself sort of look innocent in terms of, look, she's passed out, she caused all these problems. And after you're getting both stories, and I think the attorney brought in the text messages to try to prove that, she flew into a jealous rage. And from what I read, a lot of people said, yeah, but those text messages actually sort of corroborated that he did hurt her, that like she said in these text messages, I have these injuries, but I'm going to be okay. I don't want you to get in
Exactly.
trouble. So the text messages proved that she did sustain injuries. And, in the text messages, she says, I don't want to go ahead with, prosecuting her. And I don't know if she changed her mind, but also New York is probably similar to, like, say, California, where the domestic violence victim doesn't have to want to prosecute. The state will go ahead
Right, right.
anyways. So even though so these text messages, I think, helped her and the prosecutors more than it helped him. And I think it might have been a tactical mistake. And I'm no attorney. Well, I've passed the
Yeah, you
bar, but
are.
I'm not a practicing attorney.
There you go.
It was a tactical error, in my opinion, bringing these text messages because it sort of corroborated what she said and what the evidence showed happened.
Right, I agree. The final point I'm going to make, and you can react to it or not, is he doesn't sound like a good dude. Sounds like an arrogant, conceited dude. And I'm not judging him because of anything but this the final points. They played audio of him declaring himself of how great a man he is. I mean, to have a head that big, he can probably barely fit through the average size door, you know. Then they also questioned. Then he questioned whether Jabari, his girlfriend at the time, the one he beat on, uh, could live up to the standards set by the spouses of Martin Luther King and Obama, which makes no sense. Luther King's wife was a subservient woman to Luther King, accepting the fact he was sleeping with white women in various cities. And Michelle Obama seems to have as much equality in decision making as Barack. So I didn't get that, but I think his point was comparing himself to those two men. But Jabari said he was excessively controlling and prone to fits of explosive rage that left her afraid physically. When you're in fear of a man and you're still with him, you're not with him for love. Well, maybe you are. A lot of rape victims love their husbands or love their boyfriends. So. But the first point, he sounds to me like he was full of himself. What do you think? And then we'll move on.
Well, yep. I read an article, or a lot of past people who went to school with him in the drama classes said he was not a good person. Numerous people are now. I mean, that's what people do. They pile on when you're on your way down. But a lot of people have come out to say that he is not a good person. So maybe
It
it
makes
was not
sense
a
as to
one-time
why.
incident.
Yeah, and the way they dropped him, the studios, and this dropping started after he got arrested. Marvel kind of put him in a holding pattern before they let him go. But I think what you just said, that's why he was dropped. Because my first thought is, one, he's black, so why they've been protecting a lot of these individuals versus the white individuals like Johnny Depp who lost roles. But then I did a little research. They've actually been canceling both white and black people. Uh, but the way they did this one, the way it happened, I immediately thought, God, they gotta have something on him for them to do it this quick. And sure enough, what you said reiterates that. And with that, we wish Jonathan Majors the best in hopes he can change who and what he is if he is a person that's been convicted and described. Everybody deserves a second chance. Uh, whether he gets it or not, to be honest, I don't care. He doesn't affect my life. But as a human being, I hope he can become a better man. That's all you can ever do for anybody. But at the end of the day, it looks like justice was served here. It looks like he was guilty of it. He tried to throw everything he could to see what stuck against a wall, and nothing stuck. And he's going to have to reinvent himself. All right, let's move on to some quick hits here. Sean, we got about 10 minutes left. I want to talk quickly about Mickey Mouse. I got all excited because Mickey Mouse is getting ready to enter the public domain. There's a law that a copyright law, after 95 years, you can the character you created becomes public domain. Disney fought that. They got 120-year extension in the 80s. They got another extension in the 90s. Now they're not shooting for an extension. I believe because the only thing going into the public domain is Steamboat Mickey, which doesn't even closely resemble today's current Mickey Mouse. My concern is you have Disney publicly interfering and lobbying the government to grant them a couple of favors so they could keep the copyright. What's your take from that point? And is this is not a big deal? It seems like.
Well, it's funny. I was actually expecting them to try to lobby again, but I think it is getting a little ridiculous because the point of copyright law is to, allow a company to make a good profit off of their invention for a decent amount of time. And that decent amount of time, I think 95 years, which is what it's at, you know, is enough time. And they've made their money. It should go back in the public domain. But the Steamboat Willie character, like you said, is not with the Mickey Mouse we know today. So they probably decided not to lobby because it's probably more costly to do the lobbying again for another 20 years for a character that they're not even marketing. If I go to Disneyland, I'm not buying Steamboat Willie Mickey dolls at their stores. So it's not a big loss. They still keep their Mickey ears for at the amusement parks. So you can't use that anyways to designate. Have that whole thing sealed down. So it's not a big deal and probably wasn't worth the money.
Right. Now, to kind of correct you a little bit, you can buy Steamboat Mickey stuff when you go to those places, but obviously it probably didn't make a big portion of their sale. And two, they have protected every current iteration of Mickey, they have protected through the copyright laws. I have two issues, and then we'll let this go. I don't think it's the government's business. Whoever created that uh, should own it. And if Disney owns it, I don't think they have any, it should be anybody's right to go do what they want to make a profit off of Disney's product. That's how I feel, not about Disney, but any character. But there are some laws we can talk about later in other shows in terms of protecting artists where corporations kind of steal their creation. And two, this is just kicking the can down the road. Eventually, this is going to happen to every iteration they have. And I think that's where you're going to see the lobby. All right. Talk to me a little bit about Matthew Perry. Dead by ketamine. Originally listed as drowning, which is very common because as a diver, I've said this before, I know it. When you drown with diving, they say, oh, cardiac, and then they try to figure it out. So they were trying to figure it out. Can you talk to us a little bit about ketamine itself, and then the ketamine, what's it called, the ketamine therapy?
Well, just basically, ketamine they use it as an anesthetic, but it's also being recently used for depression, and sadly, it's being used as a recreational drug, which is just about every drug becomes a recreational drug.
Yeah.
Everybody will try anything, and I guess I didn't know it's been used as a date rape drug, but apparently
Wow.
Matthew apparently Matthew Perry had been undergoing some ketamine treatment for depression. Obviously, he was not given this much ketamine to take in the hot tub. I highly doubt that's what a doctor recommended. But so he overdosed on the ketamine. It pretty much shut down his system, and that's what probably made him drown. And so when I was doing research on this, I found the irony is that there was three top researchers listed on Wikipedia on ketamine, and one of them, D.M. Turner, he wrote several books on psychedelics and ketamine. He died after injecting ketamine, and he drowned in a bathtub. So it's sort of
Oh, wow.
so it's sort of weird that one of the top three people previously on ketamine research died pretty much the exact same way that Matthew Perry did.
He died because he was alone. Had somebody been there, they could have grabbed him as he went under. And, first of all, the coroner did say that his death couldn't have been from his final ketamine treatment. So he had a lot in his system. And one of the things that ketamine does, it's a hallucinogen. Is that how you say it?
Hallucinogenic.
Hallucinogenic. That's where the Spanish accent in my upbringing screwed me up. And so, but however, they use it as therapy for depression, anxiety disorders, and PTSD. But it's fairly new. You take it through IV or nasal spray. I would assume he was taking it probably through nasal spray, as it's much easier, but who knows? And it gives you a rapid relief of depression. of depression symptoms, and the ketamine can help you for days. And people are saying it shows promise. Uh, uh, some of the side effects, Sean, are nausea, dizziness, headaches, disassociation. This is the big one. Or it's one of the big ones. Disassociation or disconnection from one's bodies, thoughts, and feelings. And that's important. Our psyches are connected to our bodies. When there's a disconnect, that's when bad things can happen. Obviously, you have increased blood pressure, heart rate, and vertigo. I suffer from vertigo. And during my period, in fact, I'm suffering from it now. I'm going to have to go to the doctor, and they're going to tell me they don't know. So I got some Sudafed. Hopefully, it's based off of water in my ear. But that can mess you up. There have been times I've gotten up with vertigo and I immediately dropped to my knees perfectly because I know if I don't drop to my knees and grab something, I'm gonna boom fall. So, and the reason I bring that up, combined as a hallucinogenic, odds are he was tripping hard with a hallucinogenic, vertigo, feeling disconnected. I agree with the doctor that said this. He probably just slipped into the hot tub and drowned. Now, before I get to your comment, to conclude with the side effects, the side effects I said are minor. The serious side effects, chest pain, discomfort, or tightness, kind of like, I'm having a heart attack, I'm guessing. Confusion. When you're drunk, you can get easily confused. So think of it along those lines. Difficulty with swallowing, irregular, fast, or slow or shallow breathing, seeing, hearing, or feeling things that aren't there. That's a disconnect. And seizures. Do you think my theory is correct and not correct, but plausible? He was tripping so bad he slid into the pool and drowned. And I asked you, Sean, because the average person assumes, and it's happened to us. When you're sleeping, you feel like you're falling. Boom, you wake up. When you slip into the water, I've done that as a diver sitting on the surface of my buoy, and all of a sudden the wave hits, boom, kind of like gets me going because the water gets in my nose. That's what the average person thinks. What's your theory on what could have happened? And we're not saying this is what happened; it's just our theory.
Well, from what I read on it, it says it's an anesthetic. It probably super relaxed him to the point of, maybe being unconscious, and then he slipped under the water, and because he's on the ketamine, he didn't wake up when he went under the water, and he drowned. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, when I had a hot tub, you have a couple drinks. There's times in there I was so relaxed, I was like, man, I feel so weak. I don't even know if I can crawl out of this hot tub. I'm so relaxed and tired. And that's just after, like,
Oh, that's
three or
right.
three or four drinks. So I mean, I can't imagine if ketamine is, I'm assuming, a lot stronger than alcohol. That's, yes, the ketamine didn't OD and kill him, but it relaxed him so much he just slipped under the water, and you know that's why they have warnings everywhere, like don't drink and get in the hot tub. Well, don't do relaxing drugs and get in the hot tub either.
Right, and for an analogy, it's like AIDS. You have the HIV virus in you, the AIDS virus, and that doesn't kill you. What kills you is you catch something because your autoimmune system's been destroyed by the HIV virus. So technically, on your death certificate, died from pneumonia or something, but it was the AIDS virus that precipitated and allowed that to happen. I'm going to end this segment here with a quote. This is a quote from Dr. Zaid Fadou, the medical director at Better You and an expert in medicine. And I want to give a hat tip to Cinema Blend, where I got this article. Doctor defends Matthew Perry's ketamine treatments following autopsy results. But this is kind of like to coincide with what Sean is saying. His quote: I don't think it's fair to say he died from ketamine. If you use Xanax in a hot tub, you could drown. And if you are drunk in a hot tub, you could drown. In fact, if you're just in a hot tub for more than 30 minutes, you could have possibilities. That's why you see the warnings on hot tub. So I don't know if it's really fair to say ketamine killed him. And the reason he's saying that, Sean, is because he thinks it's a good therapy to use, and he feels people aren't going to want to do this, and providers may not want to do it either because of how viral this story has now become. And we'll never figure out exactly how he died, but we're pretty sure we know how he died. And with that, Sean, let's get to our second one. The Marvels. The global run is over. A hat tip to Collider.com. The Marvel's global box office ends as lowest grossing Marvel Comics Universe movie ever. You want to tell the audience a little bit about the overview? You want me to handle that, and then you chime in?
I'll just chime in. We'll
All
knock
right.
this out quick.
So the Marvels, as we all know, we talked about it in our very first podcast, how it was so woke. the director just blatantly making racist comments, and they think these comments actually are will bring them compassion. They don't. They're just like, no, you're just a racist. As compared to previous Marvel movies, the lowest low opening weekend. There, some critics are trying to say, oh, it's because of Disney's streaming strategy that kind of predicated this low opening. And that's probably has some truth. But to break even, the movie would have had to gross 600 million. It cost nearly 300 million to make. They had that budget, Sean, because it was a $1.1 billion gross that the first Marvel movie had. First of all, what's your take on this being oversaturation as part of the reason that it failed? We've had too much superhero movies.
I don't believe that because actually I think we've had less superhero movies recently come out because I mean, what came out before that? I mean, I can't even remember the previous superhero movie that was out before that. So I don't think it's oversaturation. People are going to grasp at straws when your movie bombs to try to justify why it bombed. It's just not a good movie.
Well, I've done a lot of research on this, ironically, not a lot like a college researcher would, but I studied the Blue Beetle, the Flash, Shazam, both movies, counting the Black Adam one, and the Marvels, and there's one tie-in every single one of these movies has, and it's a lot of them are like what I say on a subconscious level, but people because we're so tribalistic, people are not picking up on it, like the flag theme in the movie we talked about previously, and that is these are woke movies, and people are now saying I'm not going to go see it, I'm not going to support it. You're forced to go take your daughter to go see Barbie because she grew up with her daughter from a little kid and she's still a little kid. As young adults who make turn these hundreds of millions of dollars into billions, we're not going anymore. The current gross of this movie is 83 million domestically. Overseas is 120 million. This movie grossed 70 million dollars less than what the Flash made, which is seen as a colossal bust. My take is you stop making woke movies and people will come back. They're lying by saying it's a superhero theme. It's not. Have they stopped making cop buddy movies? I mean, haven't we been oversaturated with that? We get how many Hallmark movies do they make every year? It's not oversaturation. It's the quality of the movies. First of all, your take on the theme of this being woke, just another string of woke movies.
Well, I didn't, like I said, I didn't see it, but supposedly it is. I'm sticking with what I saw in the theater. They had the woke agenda, but it also just looked like a crappy movie. So I didn't go see The Flash because it didn't look good. I didn't even know Blue Beetle was out, so I don't know if that's any good.
Bro, come on, show me some Latino love. The Blue
I
Beetle
don't
was
even,
a
I,
Latino.
what, what comic universe is he in? DC, Marvel, what? I don't even know.
I remember Charlton Comics from when we were very little kids. From there he went to Vanguard, then eventually to DC. He's had three
Well, there you
iterations of
go.
Blue Beetle, but you're right, he's a minor player. Yeah, I've done a lot of study, and it's and like the some of these movies don't even have heavy woke themes. But when you sit there and say Batman is fascist, that he's one of the icons, that's a woke theme that they blatantly say. When Susan Sarandon on the Blue Beetle is on the late night show says, "Oh yeah, I played this movie's evil white person," with the military industrial complex. So they're not doing themselves, and it's common sense. You're a man. I'm a man. We were boys. We would look at Wonder Woman. Boy, that's a hot comic book character, but we gravitated to the male characters. This is an all-female cast. They took out 50% of their audience. Add the woke element. Only a moron in Hollywood would have seen this as not woke. What's your thought moving forward? What do you think it's going to take for Hollywood? And I kind of know the answer, but let the audience know. What's your take on what does Disney or any studio doing superhero movies have to do to have another blockbuster success?
Well, the first, I think they just need to produce a movie that is there purely for entertainment purposes and stick to what the characters are supposed to be from what everybody grew up on in the comic books. People go to movies to be entertained and also to reminisce about, to relive their childhood, see it come to life. I mean, that's why we talked about why I watch Cobra Kai and see the Karate Kid. It's my youth. Spider-Man. You portray Spider-Man like I read him in the comic books, and I'll go see the movie. I didn't read Marvel comic, but if they portrayed that like it was supposed to be, then and it made a good movie, I'd go see it. So portray it how the characters were made, and we'll go see the movie. At least I'll see the movie.
I agree. I'm on board with Sean. The final two comments I'll make is stop using minor characters. They're easier to use with the special effects, but the Marvel character is a convoluted character in Marvel's history. It's not a very well liked character in the comics. They've tried its own shots here and there, and it's failed with the sales. And remember your audience. Remember who your core audience is, and you'll go back to these massive blockbuster hits. I wanted to make one more point, but I completely forgot about it. But it must not be important. But just remember your audience, Disney. And remember, we're not woke, and we're showing you, yes, and it's not conservatives, it's Americans don't want crap. And with that, Sean, I'm not going to ask you for the final word on this because I sense you gave it. And we are done. We managed to put on a great show. I thought we had some great comments and points on the Obama.
You haven't stopped it yet, have you?
No. Oh, no, we're still rolling. Sean's asking if I had stopped the tape. No, we're still rolling. So we did a good job ourselves, Sean. And I say this because the audience.
You didn't do your Grumblings media? You didn't do your Grumblings media at the end.
That comes last. That comes last. But so for the audience, we need your feedback. We want to know topics you want to hear about. You want us to talk about. We lean conservative, and you can tell that. As I am uber truthful with how I see the tribalism happening. And the reason I'm uber truthful is until we can look at hard, ugly truths for what they are, truths, we can't move forward as a society. And that's my hope and goal as somebody who comes, despite my skin tone, who comes from an extremely mixed family. So with that, Sean, a great show. And for the audience, you can catch this podcast as well as others. We have our Points on the Board, our sports podcast. We have our Big Questions with Big John, our interview podcast. We have our Free for All, which is our libertarian political podcast. You can find all these along with clips at grumblingsmedia.com. You can also find us on Rumble and YouTube under the profile handle of Grumblings Media and the traditional outlets of Google, Spotify, Pandora, and Apple, the biggest ones, So for sure, and also do not forget to share this video if you listen to it, and to follow us on our various media platforms. And for Sean and myself, hosts of the Red, White, and Rude Entertainment Podcast. Until next time, my friends, we bid you adieu.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.